Have you ever found yourself standing on the outside of a room, just kind of looking through the glass?
Oh, yeah. Like, constantly.
Right. Maybe it's like an exclusive party you weren't invited to, or a career milestone that seems reserved for people with the right pedigree,
Mm.
or just a social circle that feels completely impenetrable. You're close enough to see the glittering lights and hear the laughter, but there is this invisible, soundproof barrier keeping you out.
It's a very specific, agonizing kind of displacement.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you aren't completely removed from the world you want, which would honestly be easier.
Yeah.
You are kept just close enough to observe everything that you're being denied.
Exactly. And today's deep dive is about what happens when you take that exact feeling, that raw, desperate yearning to be on the inside, and you just weaponize it.
Yeah, weaponized is the perfect word for it.
So we are digging into a massive stack of sources today. We've got biographical excerpts, historical analyses, study guides, all centered on F. Scott Fitzgerald and his magnum opus, The Great Gatsby.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. And our mission today is to figure out how a life defined by this chaotic pendulum swing between, staggering insecurity, dizzying fame, and then just crushing disappointment. How that birthed a novel that essentially defined the 1920s.
And perhaps the most compelling part of this stack of sources is the revelation that this book only became a cultural juggernaut after Fitzgerald died.
Right.
Genuinely believing he was a complete failure.
Which is just so sad. But, I mean, we are looking at the mechanics of an American myth here.
Exactly. Fitzgerald wasn't merely observing the Roaring Twenties as some detached reporter. He was dissecting his own life in real time.
Yeah.
He pulled apart his own desires, his own financial humiliations, and his desperate need for validation, really just to see how the gears worked. And then he projected those gears right onto his characters.
And those humiliations, they started incredibly early. There is this fascinating contradiction right in his origins. So he is born Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Literally named after his distant cousin.
Right. The guy who wrote The Star-Spangled Banner, he has the branding of American greatness stamped right onto his birth certificate.
But the financial reality of his childhood
Mhm.
paints a completely different picture.
Totally. His father's wicker furniture business failed. Then his dad lost a subsequent job as a salesman for Procter & Gamble.
Ouch.
Yeah. The sources describe a family clinging to middle-class respectability, but they were heavily subsidized by an inheritance from his mother's side.
And that tension between his aristocratic name and his very precarious financial reality that created a hyper-awareness of class. I mean, he was a highly intelligent kid, but he learned very early to view the world through the lens of capital.
And when he finally gets to Princeton, this elite Ivy League institution, that lens only magnifies, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He is one of the few Catholics on campus, and he is painfully aware that he is not among the wealthy elite who dominate the university's eating clubs.
Right. So he channels his energy into writing plays and stories rather than his academics.
He's essentially trying to write his way into the inner circle.
And that desire to penetrate the inner circle brings us to a 16-year-old Chicago socialite named Ginevra King.
Yes.
He meets her during his sophomore year, and he falls completely, obsessively in love. The letters in our sources show she becomes his ultimate muse.
But he runs headfirst into that invisible glass wall you mentioned.
He really does. Her incredibly wealthy family effectively dismisses him. There's a specific line purportedly delivered by her father, Charles King, that just feels like a physical blow.
It does.
He says poor boys shouldn't think of marrying rich girls.
I mean, that single sentence became the algorithm running in the background of Fitzgerald's brain for the rest of his life.
Wow.
Every decision he made, every character he wrote, it was filtered through that brutal American math. It taught him that talent and charm were secondary currencies.
Right.
The primary currency, the only one that could actually buy love and belonging, was money.
And he just spirals after that rejection. He drops out of Princeton, and the biographical notes actually indicate he was feeling genuinely suicidal.
Yeah, it was a very dark period.
He enlists in the army during World War I, basically secretly hoping to die in combat. And just as a quick historical aside from the sources, while he was at a training camp, he actually served under Captain Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and apparently detested him. But anyway, while he's stationed in Alabama waiting to deploy, the algorithm in his brain gets tested again. He meets a 17-year-old named Zelda Sayre.
Zelda. She was the quintessential Southern belle, the most celebrated debutante of her affluent Montgomery Country Club set.
Right.
Fitzgerald is captivated, and a romance blossoms. But when he proposes, history repeats itself.
Zelda hesitates.
Exactly. She refuses to marry him until he can prove he has the financial means to maintain the lifestyle she expects.
So he moves to New York to work in advertising, living in relative poverty to try and prove himself, but she eventually breaks off the engagement.
It's devastating for him.
It makes me think about how often we see this dynamic play out today, you know? Think about your own industry. How often do you see someone get the promotion or the funding or the opportunity, not because they were the most talented person in the room, but simply because they had the right pedigree or the right financial backing? Fitzgerald's romantic life was essentially like a rigged carnival game.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's like he keeps walking up to the booth, paying the entrance fee with his ambition and his raw talent. But that giant stuffed bear at the top, you know, getting the girl, being accepted into the upper crust, it's always strategically placed just out of reach by the carnival barker because Fitzgerald's bank account isn't big enough.
And the realization that the game was rigged, it triggered this manic survival instinct in him.
He retreated to his parents' house in St. Paul, right?
Yeah, he isolated himself, stopped drinking, and furiously rewrote a manuscript he'd been tinkering with. I mean, this wasn't just a creative exercise.
No.
This was a desperate financial Hail Mary. And that manuscript became his debut novel, This Side of Paradise.
And the Hail Mary actually connects.
It really does.
The book is published in 1920, and it is a massive commercial hit. It sells 40,000 copies in its first year. Suddenly, at 24 years old, F. Scott Fitzgerald is a household name.
Overnight success.
The magazines that had previously rejected him are now paying premium rates for his short stories. And predictably, now that he is rich and famous, Zelda agrees to marry him.
His financial success acts as a master key. It unlocks all the doors that had previously been shut to him, and what follows is just a frenetic crash course in the reality of fame.
They marry, move to New York, and become the ultimate celebrity couple of a newly minted era.
The Jazz Age.
Yeah, and the anecdotes from this period are incredibly vivid. The sources say they are living at the Biltmore and Commodore hotels. He's reportedly doing handstands in the lobby.
She's sliding down the banisters.
They are spending half an hour just spinning in revolving doors or riding on the roofs of taxis down Fifth Avenue. The writer Dorothy Parker observed them and noted how strikingly young and famous they were. Fitzgerald even coins the term the Jazz Age, defining it as an era racing along under its own power, served by great filling stations full of money.
Which is a great line.
It is, but I look at these sources and I have to ask, were they actually happy? Because a lot of this sounds like an exhausting, desperate performance.
You hit the nail on the head. It was entirely performative.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the Jazz Age wasn't just a spontaneous party. Mechanically, it was a profound trauma response to the devastation of World War I.
Oh, that makes sense.
An entire generation realized that life was fragile and the old rules didn't protect them, so they turned to extreme consumerism and instant gratification.
And Fitzgerald monetized that shift?
He did. But he possessed a deep, smoldering resentment toward the very people buying his books. He was living in this moral permissiveness, enjoying the endless wealth, but he was incredibly observant of the moral bankruptcy beneath it all.
And that internal misery, it really bleeds through the sources. At the absolute peak of his success, he is riding in a taxi in New York, looking at the skyline, and he just starts weeping. Yeah. He tells a friend he realizes he would never be so happy again. Worse than that, he confessed right before his wedding that he only married Zelda because he couldn't stand the thought of anyone else having her.
It's a very dark foundation for a marriage.
It is so dark.
He is simultaneously the high priest of the Jazz Age and its most cynical critic.
Right.
He is completely dazzled by the wealthy while simultaneously despising their carelessness and his own complicity in their world.
He needs their money, but he hates what he has to become to get it.
Exactly. And that specific toxic duality provided the perfect psychological environment for the novel he was about to write.
Which brings us to Long Island. By 1922, they moved to Great Neck. This is a peninsula known for new money, which directly maps onto West Egg in the Great Gatsby.
Right across the bay is Port Washington.
The old money establishment, East Egg.
The geography of his resentment literally dictates the map of the novel.
I love that. And I want to look at the real-life inspirations the sources highlight here because this is fascinating. I saw this name, Max Gerlach, in the notes. How does a guy like that become the blueprint for J. Gatsby?
So Max Gerlach was their real-life neighbor. He was a very mysterious gentleman bootlegger.
You bootlegger.
Yeah, a World War I veteran who, through lavish parties, flaunted an inexplicable amount of wealth and get this, constantly referred to people using the phrase old sport.
No way! He actually said old sport.
He really did. Fitzgerald observed this man, someone who clearly invented a persona funded by illicit money just to fit into high society, and he recognized a kindred spirit.
Wow.
Gatsby is essentially an exaggerated, romanticized version of Gerlach's manufactured identity.
And the women in the novel are equally synthesized from his real life. Daisy Buchanan is clearly carrying the ghost of Ginevra King, the rich girl who got away. But Zelda's voice is in there too. There is a famous moment where Daisy hopes her daughter will be a beautiful little fool. The sources show that was a direct quote from Zelda, murmured as she was waking up from anesthesia after giving birth to their own daughter.
It's incredible how he just lifted that.
And Jordan Baker, the famously cynical golfer, is based on Ginevra's close friend, Edith Cummings, who was a premier amateur golfer of the era. He is just lifting entire personalities from his social circle.
He was a highly porous writer. He absorbed the people around him, the sensational news stories of the day, like the heavily publicized Hall Mills murder case, and wove them into a cohesive narrative.
But perhaps the most striking example of this porosity is how he interacted with the book's physical packaging.
Oh, the cover art.
The iconic Celestial Eyes dust jacket, painted by Francis Cuget, it features those sad, disembodied flapper eyes hovering over a carnival-lit skyline. This detail absolutely blew my mind.
It's a great story.
Cuget completed that artwork before the book was even finished. Fitzgerald saw the drafts of the cover art before he sailed for France in 1924, and he explicitly told his editor, Max Perkins, not to give that cover to anyone else because he had actually written the imagery into the manuscript.
It's wild to think about.
Are we actually saying that a commissioned piece of marketing art dictated the literary symbolism of a masterpiece? Like, is Cugat responsible for the haunting eyes of T.J. Eckelberg staring out over the Valley of Ashes?
Well, the historical timeline strongly suggests it. It proves that Fitzgerald wasn't rigidly executing a pre-planned outline. He was synthesizing his environment in real time.
Yeah.
If a piece of commercial art captured the exact tone of existential dread and constant surveillance he was trying to convey, he simply absorbed it and made it a central pillar of the text.
So he takes all this resentment, this geography, and these real-life characters, and he builds this massive ecosystem. Let's look at how these pieces interact. Because Gatsby's pursuit of the green light at the end of Daisy's dock is often taught as a symbol of the American dream.
Right, but the sources suggest the novel is actually arguing that the dream is complete illusion.
The novel is an autopsy of the American dream.
Exactly. Gatsby assumes that if he acquires enough wealth, he can buy his way out of his past and into the elite class.
He believes money is an equalizer.
But the old money establishment, represented by Tom and Daisy Buchanan, proves that class permanence always trumps self-made wealth. Gatsby is ultimately destroyed, not because he's a criminal, but because he has the audacity to try and transcend the social class he was born into.
And the old guard's terror of being replaced isn't just about money. It manifests as virulent racism. Tom Buchanan goes on these white supremacist rants at the dinner table.
Yes.
He talks about a book called The Rise of the Colored Empires, which is Fitzgerald parodying a real, incredibly popular racist book from the 1920s by a man named Lothrop Stoddard. And I want to be clear here, we are just looking at what the historical sources are pointing out. We aren't taking any political sides, just examining the text.
Right. Right. We're just reporting what's there. And this highlights a very specific era-defining anxiety.
Right.
You have to understand how nativism functioned mechanically in the 1920s. The established elite weren't merely protecting their bank accounts.
They viewed themselves as genetically superior.
Yes. They saw the influx of immigrants, the Great Migration, and the rise of the newly rich as an existential threat to what they considered the pure American bloodline.
Wow.
Tom Buchanan's panic isn't just about losing his wife to Gatsby. He is terrified of his entire social order being displaced by people he considers biologically inferior. Gatsby's new money is a symptom of a changing world that Tom wants to forcefully suppress.
And that suppression requires a massive industrial engine, which brings us to the environmental toll.
The Valley of Ashes.
Yes, it sits directly between the glamour of Long Island and the economic hub of New York City. The sources note it was based on the real Flushing Meadows Corona ash dumps.
This isn't just a moody backdrop.
No, it has a very specific mechanical function in the story.
It serves as a literal physical toll gate. The immense wealth of the Buchanans and the massive consumerist lifestyle of Gatsby's parties are funded by relentless industrialization.
Right.
The Valley of Ashes represents the ecological and human cost of that machinery. The wealthy literally have to drive their luxury cars through the rotting decay their own lifestyles produced.
But they simply roll their windows up and keep driving.
Entirely indifferent to the marginalized people like George and Myrtle Wilson, who were trapped in the ash.
The text also captures the shifting ground of modern identity, specifically regarding sexuality. There are numerous queer readings of the text focusing on the narrator, Nick Carraway.
Oh, absolutely. He is highly unreliable.
Very. And there's a very suggestive scene where Nick leaves a party with a, quote, pale feminine man named Mr. McKee. Following a sudden break in the text, Nick is abruptly standing beside a bed while McKee is sitting there in his underwear.
It reflects a post-war era where traditional identities and boundaries were becoming increasingly blurred and confusing.
But alongside those shifting boundaries, we also have to confront the deeply embedded prejudices of the author himself.
Yes.
Again, just looking impartially at the sources, the character of Meyer Wolfsheim, the criminal who helps Gatsby build his fortune, is based on the real-life gambler Arnold Rothstein.
Right.
The physical descriptions of Wolfsheim in the novel rely heavily on grotesque anti-Semitic caricatures. And while some historical analysis argues this merely reflected the casual, systemic bigotry of the 1920s, it stands as a glaring reminder that Fitzgerald's critique of society was still filtered through his own flawed, biased lens.
It really is a dense, brilliant, deeply flawed ecosystem.
It is. Thinking about Nick Carraway navigating all of this, I keep picturing a documentary filmmaker.
Bro.
Yeah, like he starts out trying to objectively film a nature documentary about the ultra-rich. He just wants to observe these beautiful predators in their natural habitat.
That's a great way to put it.
But slowly, the camera lens cracks. He realizes the subjects are deeply toxic, the environment they inhabit is dying, and worst of all, he's become trapped in his own footage.
And the moment Nick truly gets trapped in that footage is the moment he realizes that Gatsby isn't a predator at all.
Gatsby is the prey.
Exactly. Gatsby is the one who gets sacrificed so that the Buchanans can retreat back into their money and their vast carelessness.
Wow.
Nick's resulting disgust is the reader's disgust. He recognizes that a society willing to destroy the environment, marginalized people, and anyone who tries to climb the ladder just to maintain its elite boundaries is a society not worth aspiring to.
So Fitzgerald pours all of this, his trauma, his brilliant observations, his own toxic biases, into this manuscript. Scribner's publishes The Great Gatsby in April 1925, and the world responds with a collective, indifferent shrug.
Yeah.
He made a grand total of $2,000 from it.
It was a devastating commercial failure compared to his earlier work. The critics largely missed the depth of the critique. One famously dismissed it as a literary lemon meringue.
A literary lemon meringue.
Yeah. By October of that year, the book had sold fewer than 20,000 copies, leaving stacks of unsold inventory just sitting in a warehouse.
And this failure triggers a tragic, accelerating downward spiral. Everything in his life unravels.
It's heartbreaking.
Zelda suffers a severe mental breakdown, is diagnosed with schizophrenia, and spends the rest of her life in and out of institutions. Fitzgerald moves to Hollywood, desperately trying to make a living as a screenwriter while battling severe alcoholism. In 1940, at the age of just 44, he dies of a heart attack, leaving his final novel, The Love of the Last Tycoon, unfinished. He died genuinely believing he was a forgotten failure.
It is a profoundly grim ending for a man who was so obsessed with success.
Right.
But the story of the novel itself has this miraculous second act.
This is the crazy part.
During World War II, an organization called the Council on Books in Wartime began printing armed services editions. These are small, lightweight paperbacks, specifically designed to fit into a soldier's uniform pocket.
Okay.
They printed 155,000 copies of Gatsby and shipped them to troops overseas.
Wait, I have to stop and ask about this because the sources present this as the turning point. But why this book?
Yeah, it seems weird, right?
A story about a millionaire throwing lavish parties on Long Island seems like the absolute last thing a guy freezing in a trench in Europe or fighting in the Pacific would want to read. How did giving books to soldiers change the entire trajectory of American literature?
It really comes down to the mechanism of distribution and the psychology of the audience. First, the U.S. military provided a massive, unprecedented distribution network that forcibly placed the book into the hands of a demographic the original publisher never could have reached.
Right.
Second, the book was championed by his old Princeton friend, the influential critic Edmund Wilson, who critically repositioned Fitzgerald's legacy. But most importantly, the soldiers possessed the necessary historical distance to actually understand the book.
Because the readers in 1925 were still at the party.
Precisely. You can't see the critique of the era when you're drowning in it. But those soldiers deeply understood the profound disillusionment of the American dream.
They understood loss.
Yes. Think about Gatsby himself. He is a veteran who went off to fight in Europe, only to return and find that the America he fought for and the girl he left behind had entirely moved on without him.
Oh, wow.
The soldiers weren't reading a party book. They were reading a tragedy about the impossibility of repeating the past.
Fitzgerald famously wrote, "There are no second acts in American lives." But his novel absolutely defied him.
It really did.
It became the great American novel, a staple of nearly every high school curriculum in the country. It captured a set of anxieties that simply never went away.
The Jazz Age ended, the stock market crashed, but the fundamental American obsessions with class mobility, the illusion of self-reinvention, and the destructive nature of unchecked wealth, those remain entirely relevant.
Which brings this whole discussion directly to you listening right now. Whether you are prepping for a boardroom meeting, studying for a final exam, or just trying to navigate your own ambitions and desires, you are likely chasing your own green light. You have your own version of that stuffed bear sitting at the top of the carnival game. Fitzgerald's life and Jay Gatsby's death serve as a glaring warning to be incredibly careful about what we define as success and what parts of ourselves we are willing to sacrifice to attain it.
The true tragedy of Gatsby wasn't that he dreamed big. His tragedy was that he attached his vast, magnificent, almost superhuman capacity for hope to an object as shallow and unworthy as Daisy Buchanan's world.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought from the very end of our sources. As of 2021, The Great Gatsby officially entered the public domain.
Which is huge.
The cultural gatekeeping surrounding the text is legally over. Anyone can now write a sequel, a prequel, a feminist retelling, a queer adaptation, or a sci-fi spin-off without asking permission.
Right.
If Jay Gatsby's ultimate tragic flaw was his manic obsession with rewriting the past to secure his future, what does it mean that we, the reading public, are now endlessly rewriting Gatsby's past?
That's a great question.
If we now possess the power to reshape the ultimate American myth, what will our updated version of the American dream actually look like? Are we still just going to stand on the outside of the room, looking through the glass, hoping to finally be invited inside? Or are we finally ready to dismantle the glass and build an entirely new house?